we've been clear about supply management. We've been clear about language rights.
One thing I know to be clear is that neither Mark Carney nor the governor of the Bank of Canada have any idea what they are doing with these tariffs. Welcome back to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. Many of you will likely remember when Mark Carney made the prediction that the American economy was already starting to weaken when he was on stage during the English prime ministerial debates. I had stated out loud that I don't agree with that assessment at all, and that by the middle of the summer we would know one way or the other. We can now see that not only was Mark Carney way off in what was going to happen to the United States economy and as a result the global economy, he further is not capable or competent enough to get a negotiated deal with Donald Trump, despite the fact that Donald Trump has negotiated deals with, let's call it 50 countries anyways. And he's negotiated these deals based on the idea that those countries want access to his market. Now we hear the Bank of Canada governor come out today, Tiff Macklem, talking the same sort of vague, I have no idea which direction everything is going to go as Mark Carney. And as they both are trained in the same schools and they both have held that job as governor of Bank of Canada, we can understand why their approach is identical. And we can further see that this is not about the personality of Mark Carney. This is about not having the skill set required to solve the problem. Now, I'm saying that to all you out there who want to believe that because he got a degree from Harvard or a degree from Oxford, he's somehow qualified to be in charge of a country. These things do not mesh. They do not go together. By example, we can see Donald Trump leading his country to prosperity. And Donald Trump, I don't believe, went to either of those schools. Policy is what matters here. The Bank of Canada come out today and said, oh, we're not going to change the interest rates, because they have no idea what they're doing. They're jumping in both directions, and they all but admit it.
So in the NPR, you talk about the effective tariff rate on Canadian goods increasing by 5 percentage points, but you don't state what the baseline was for that. So I'm wondering, first of all, what is the bank's estimate of the current effective tariff rate on Canadian goods entering the U.S.? And secondly, how did you come up with the estimate that 95% of Canadian goods can become USMCA compliant?
Sure, I'll tackle that one, Mark. So there we go. So to your first question, really, the short answer to the effective tariff rate of 5%. Where was the baseline? It was close to zero, it's just barely above zero. How we get there, we look at the U.S. Census Bureau data, and then you look at the sort of composition of the goods coming into Canada, or coming into the U.S. from Canada, and you get to an effective tariff rate.
And that's about 5%.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to laugh at her, but that was exactly the example of what I was talking about, how they're all educated in the same schools and they have absolutely no idea what they're doing. What you heard her say there was, we guesstimate that everything that was going into the United States from Canada, the cost of it is going to be increased by about 5%. That's what they mean by effective tariff rate. How do we get there? Well, we look at all of the stuff that's covered under USMCA and we decide how much of it is going to actually be impacted by these new tariffs put on by the United States. And we figure that's going to be about 5%. If we call where we were at approximately just a little bit above zero, then you can see that really all it's going to be is an additional 5%. But where that pertains to you and I is that she's relying heavily on the idea that this CUSMA agreement will hold till the end of time, which we all know that once the renewal comes up in 2026, Donald Trump's not going to show up. He's just not going to send anybody to the table. He's going to indicate that he's no longer interested in having a free trade arrangement with either Mexico or Canada. And now all of the products will fall under all of the various tariffs that have already been outlined over the last few months.
Yeah. The 95% compliant, I mean, again, you have to look at the composition, and it's also a forecast. So there are exporters to the US that qualify to be CUSMA compliant, but maybe haven't completed the paperwork. They're more motivated to do that now, so we expect more and more goods to become compliant with CUSMA. And again, you have to look at the composition. So, and the composition not just of the firms that are exporting and whether they're compliant, but the total of goods that are going into the US market.
Yeah, I just underline, Mark, these are scenarios. They're based on a lot of assumptions. The situation is fluid. Canada and the United States are, those discussions are ongoing. We'll see where they land. The reason to put out scenarios is really to reflect the fact that there is more than one outcome here.
Okay. It's just what he said there. If you were anywhere else in any other education level, you would just say, "I got no idea what's going to happen." But they can't do that. That's the ego that I've been telling you guys about for since Mark Carney stuck his head out from behind the curtain there. This is what I've been trying to make you understand. When you root everything, when your entire self-worth comes out of your intellect, the ability to admit that you don't have a clue or the ability to admit that you were wrong is like pulling teeth. You just simply do not have that skill set because in your mind, you might as well tell the world that you're a complete failure. Now, I'm not trying to call Tiff Macklem a failure, but I am trying to get you to understand that it is no way in the world is he just going to make it simple and say, hey, we got no idea what's going to happen. It could go in any different direction. We're basically playing tiddlywinks up here while we wait and see how it falls out into the States. I mean, that's all he really said, which is exactly the same thing Mark Carney is saying. Now, I believe she's the vice governor, but it could be I believe she's the vice governor. She was like, oh, it's all about the composition, and there are places that haven't filled out the paperwork. And when she said that, I thought of Chrystia Freeland saying, cancel your Disney subscription, because it's about the same level of cope. Anybody who hasn't filled out the paperwork and hasn't taken that kind of step is not entrenched enough to be worried about not moving to the United States. Simply wholesale take their product down there where their corporate tax rates are going to be cheaper, where the rate for your house is going to be cheaper, where everything is going to be a better standard of living with more money flowing around everywhere. And then she said, no, but you got to look at the composition. Of course, what she means by composition is what kind of products are going into it. Is some of it coming through China? Are we getting, like, all of these kinds of things are being added to this in her mind. But the manufacturing sector in Canada is being decimated. The manufacturing sector in Canada is just running to the States as fast as possible to get set up ahead of all of the other outfits that are coming in from Europe or coming in from Asia. They're getting down there so that they can be competitive, because the idea is not to be able to sell the product to the Americans at only a 5% increase like the Bank of Canada or the Prime Minister is trying to get you to understand. Let's put yourself in the shoes of the businessman. They have to be able to go down there and say made in America. If they put a made in America tag on it and send it up to the States or up into Canada and it goes up for 5% more, they don't really care. But if they try to go the other way around, it'll sit on the shelf. They won't buy it in the States if the one right beside it is it's 5% cheaper even, and it says made in America. The individual down in the United States won't care about the rest of it. They'll just be like, well, it's 25 cents cheaper, but it's made in America. So you have to see that for what it is. And now couple that with the answer that Mark Carney gave when he was trying to convince everybody that giving you $20 off a trip over the Confederation Bridge was going to revitalize the entire economy and put money back in your pocket.
There is a landing zone that's possible, but we have to get there, and we'll see what happens.
Does that landing zone include supply management in any way? Are you open to more U.S. access to the Canadian market for the dairy?
We've been clear about supply management. We've been clear about language rights. There was access negotiated, and as part of, as Minister Freeland knows, as part of the existing USMCA, as they would call it, CUSMA Accord.
Well, I think that clears it all up. Don't worry about it, guys. Chrystia Freeland is on the case. Oh, man, we are doomed. I just feel like if you're going to refer to any of your ministers, that probably was like, you know, maybe it would have been just as bad to refer to Stephen Guilbeault. Chrystia Freeland, whose entire economic policy as the finance minister came directly from the pen of Mark Carney. I believe that wholeheartedly. Couple of interesting things there, right? Well, we'll see where it lands. So he really has no idea what's happening. And then he said, no, we've been very clear about the language rights. You're telling me that this entire thing is hinging on whether or not we can put French packaging into Quebec. See, what a lot of people don't appreciate, because you live in Canada and you have a bilingual label. In Quebec, however, they're not happy with that bilingual label. They made all industry change that bilingual label so that the French is 10% larger than the English, or better yet, if you can just give us a label that is 100% French. So a lot of times companies have to spend more money to repackage things, especially things like video games or stuff that's not necessarily being sold as food into the particular grocery stores. And that is what you need to hear there. That's important. That's imperative. That means not only is he talking about protecting the French language across the country, but he's specifically referring to Bill 101, one of the, I'll just let me assure you that it is a very hateful piece of legislation. Thing is, Donald Trump has gone all over the world hammering out deals with the countries based on the idea that he gets more access to your market with his American product. Now we have the people of Quebec, or at least the government of Quebec, deciding that Americans cannot have larger access, and they keep referring back to the USMCA or the CUSMA or whatever you want to call it, that it's a free trade agreement, right? That's all you have to understand, that it's a free trade agreement. And with every passing day, it becomes the United States of America's only free trade agreement. So now they want access to our market, and the government in Quebec is convincing Mark Carney that if he doesn't protect the French packaging, as well as protect French dairy, I suppose, then the voter base that the Liberals rely so heavily on in Quebec will probably turn against him. Now, can we say that that's Stephen Guilbeault whispering in his ear? Can we say that it's the PQ whispering in his ear, like the provincial government, the CAC, I think they are? Is that his advisors? Is it all three? I don't really believe that it matters. I think that you heard him say that he's trying to protect the French rights because he's speaking directly to what he believes is a big base in Quebec that give the Liberal Party. You take the Quebec out of any election, and the Liberals no longer they don't have the seats. Without Quebec, they don't have the seats, which is ironic, because if you were to take three products, put one made in Quebec, one made in the United States, and one made in Canada, the person in Quebec will probably buy the one that says made in Quebec. But if you were to give them only two choices, made in Canada, made in the U.S., they will probably buy the one made in the U.S. There's a lot of dislike for other parts of the country in the province of Quebec, especially in the highest halls in the government segment of Quebec. So what we hear now is Mark Carney deciding that because he knows he cannot stop these 50% tariffs on the steel, on the aluminum. Algoma's already asking for a $500 million bailout, and that's without a finalization on the deal. Donald Trump is not going to allow them to send our steel, aluminum, and copper. Canada's steel, aluminum, and copper is going to be the last one that he allows into that country at under 50% tariff. We are the one that threatens the revitalization of his industry the most. These other countries, they got to put it on ships and sail it to the United States of America. Even if that costs exactly the same, it takes 10 times as long. Canada, however, can drive a train up and put raw ore into the train, or we can drive it down in a truck. We can put the finished product on a train. We can get it there much faster, even if the costs are the same, which they are not. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, the risks are not the same either. When open ocean can be very tricky. Let's just forget all of that. Just appreciate that we can get it there faster, meaning that we can put a lot more of it into the market. So because of that, we are strategically the one that he's going to be least likely to allow to come across the border without a tariff. That includes the cars. So all of that industry is going to be heavily tariffed. And we as a country didn't do ourselves any favors because we've lost an entire season of building. We've lost an entire season of trying to get things up and running. We've wasted time talking about C5. We've wasted time of watching Mark Carney go down to Australia and talk about radar. We've done nothing to get shovels into the ground in this country so that people can start to sell to themselves. That's what's going to be happening into the United States. We've done nothing to repeal many of the destructive laws that are getting in the way of having healthy commerce in this country. We've done nothing about covering the vast distances and how we can do that both inexpensively and more effectively. Again, I say magnetic levitation. And how these are problems that have been a part of this fabric of this country for many years that people have been able to avoid because they want to tell themselves that the real market is the United States of America. So now we have this very strange dichotomy where we are in a position to build our own country the way that we want it to be, to make it into something that can be strong and powerful, except for we elected people that A, don't possess the skills, B, don't possess the vision, they don't understand how it gets done, and then C, are relying heavily on people who want to see the destruction of the country. So how can we, I mean, that's chasing your own tail. It is an understatement. The amount of contradiction in that sort of scenario that I just laid out for you makes you wonder again, right, how we hopefully can pull this together, how we can hope to bring it together based on all of these individual factors, based on the idea that many parts of the base of the Liberal Party don't want Canada to succeed. And you have to wonder, how far up the chain does that go? Does that go right to the bank accounts of the Ontario Teachers Union, who in many investments from Mark Carney himself, I suppose, are going to be enriched by the lack of progress that Canadians are making? And the idea that they're holding to this, steel aluminum tariffs because this is the product that they want to be shipping out, knowing full well that everywhere Donald Trump has gone to negotiate anybody that's making steel or aluminum or copper, they have had to open their market full and are still paying tariffs when brought into the country here, like when they're brought into the United States. So anybody can just take a look at that and think to their mind, well, it doesn't matter how much you give up on the CUSMA, it doesn't matter how much you renegotiate it. The steel, the copper, the aluminum, the cars, they're gone. That industry can no longer rely on feeding the American market. There will be a small percentage of stuff allowed to be entered into the market for backup and for people who over purchase and just simply cannot wait, much like they do with the Canadian softwood lumber. So we can already see the example of it. And to have the idea of having commerce come into the country, at least the Americans will be investing in the country by allowing their products to come in. They will be investing in the country. Of course, the Liberal government and their laws are going to be in the way, but that would be step two. First, you bring in the product and then you begin to petition the politician. That's how all business is done everywhere. So we would have that product coming across, which in some ways might revitalize localized industry, giving out small jobs, little jobs, not necessarily in manufacturing, but certainly in the retail end of it, sales jobs and, shelf stocking and warehousing and all of those kinds of things. But the Liberal government lacks the vision to pull that off. And worse, they lack the ability to let people do what they want to do. Remember that for all of the term liberal, they are very controlling. That's why they continue to enact all of these laws. I could give you a lot of really good examples. However, I don't think that you need them. I believe that you understand what I'm trying to get you to see here. But we could say Bill C-69, we can say Bill 48, We can understand that what the liberal in name only government is most afraid of is losing their influence on the overall commerce of this country. But by stopping trade based on a language, the absurdity of that, this is why he's willing to destroy the entire country for language, for phonetics. Is this the kind of thinking that is going to lead Canada to prosperity? Or is this the kind of thinking that's going to lead Canada to ultimately its full-blown demise? You can let me know what you think down in the comments. I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.